welcome back to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your Wiretaps episode for Monday, May 25th. Alex Brown joins me, as always, for these Wiretaps episodes. Alex, how are things going?
Very good, thank you, Graham. Staying remote and staying safe.
Yeah, so you guys the UK is still under quite a bit of lockdown, but I guess not many cases in your corner of England, I'm guessing, all the way down in Cornwall.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit nervous because obviously they're starting to lift some of the lockdown restriction, and we're in a bit of a tourist spot, so I'm sure we'll be seeing more activity around here pretty soon.
Yeah. Same here in France. They've lifted some of the restrictions, and it's, we're trying to stay healthy, but there's a lot more people around than there were. So, but in any event, yeah, it's this is uncharted waters. So we'll see how it all evolves as the summer goes on. I'm really hoping that it dies down, and that, because I'm thinking a lot about kids who are heading off to school in the fall. And, we keep seeing different announcements. The Cal State system, I guess Cal State system said, oh, we're online for the fall semester.
Yeah, I think anyone that's going for a one-year program next year has got to be a little bit nervous, whether they cancel all classes, for the year or for the first part. It's going to be a huge chunk of their experience. So, yeah, it's very troubling right now, I would say, Graham.
Yeah, and I've been talking to, program directors, associate deans, admissions directors at a number of schools, and I'm hearing, just very different, approaches. Like everyone's kind of got their own thought, and I think some of it also is very dependent on where the institution is located and how big the institution is. So
yeah, and just this whole idea that we're all anticipating and waiting for the potential for a second wave.
Right.
And obviously, if there is a second wave of COVID-19, wherever that is in the world, it's going to be devastating to those parts of the world in terms of business, commerce, obviously health first and foremost. But
sure,
for institutions, academic institutions, a second wave is going to be devastating.
Yeah, really not good. Yeah, and schools are losing, everyone's in a tough spot. Candidates are saying, well, if it's online, I want my money back, or I want a portion of my money back. And schools are, losing money because they can't do a lot of their executive education. Or I think I heard that Harvard Business School is going to lose like hundreds of millions of dollars in executive education, because they normally have these, people come to their campus, they spend like $70,000 for a week-long marketing program and get a certificate or some. So it's, this is a tough time, and it's such a weird thing because it's a moving target. You see schools extending start dates out, hoping that things will kind of be okay. I've heard some schools talking about, we'll do the big lectures online with Zoom, and then we will allow students to come into campus, to be present at the university, to come into to the facilities and have like small study groups or small elective classes, and just put them in giant lecture halls so that people could socially distance. So I've heard that sort of hybrid idea out there.
Yeah, I think that's the Cambridge model, actually, Graham.
Okay, so they're just going to do yeah. So I have heard, we're getting a lot of interesting data, as some of our listeners for certain know. We ran yet another, survey over the last couple of weeks and have seen some really interesting responses. This one was really focused around what do people think about the fall semester and getting a visa and showing up and, travel bans and online versus hybrid versus in person. So we're going to share those results with any luck later this week. So stay tuned. Really appreciate everyone filling that stuff out. Alex, tell me a little bit about, you sent me a note yesterday. You were stunned at the level of activity on LiveWire for kind of, late May. So what was going on that made you say that?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, if LiveWire is just a small indication of the activity in round 3, that lots of folks are taking advantage of the extended deadlines in round 3, as a result, we're getting folks shifting off the wait lists, getting admitted, and so forth. In typical years, we just don't see this level of activity in round 3.
Yeah, and I think you've got a bunch of different applicant types, right? You've got I guess what you call the trade up types, people who already had an acceptance but noticed that some of these top schools extended their deadlines and figured, hey, I might as well throw my hat in the ring. And then, you also have, I think, a group that we're going to talk a little bit about today on this episode, but a group of folks who are, maybe they've just lost their job, or, they're kind of just thinking, you know what, the climate right now to do business may not be so great. And so if I can run off and get my MBA next year instead of waiting another year, maybe I'll do it and take a flyer on these late rounds. So lots of activity. I want to get into the wiretap stuff, though, because there are some interesting candidates that you picked out. It looks like you picked a couple of ApplyWire entries and one DecisionWire. So let's actually start with the ApplyWire folks, because I think there's some interesting themes there that will fit with what we were just talking about. But before we dive in, is there anything else that you wanted to call people's attention to this week?
No, I think let's get started. This week is actually, in terms of deadlines, a little bit quieter. Just last week, lots of big schools had round 3 decision deadlines.
Yeah, and I think we will see continued movement on the wait lists, but there's no more big notification dates this week. So, all right, let's dive in and talk about wiretaps candidate number 1. So this is an ApplyWire entry, and the candidate indicates that they are applying to Emory and that they want to start this fall. So this is a late round application. They've been working in operations and manufacturing in their career to date, and they would love to pivot and get into consulting, or maybe they kind of indicate other, which they later describe as maybe even going back into operations. The companies that they have on their list are Accenture, Bain, BCG, Ernst & Young, and PwC. GMAT score 710, GPA 2.45, and years of work experience 10. This person's located in Atlanta, and they mention, been working in operations and manufacturing throughout their career and are thinking about consulting and using a 2-year full-time, MBA to make that pivot. They did say, they like operations, might end up staying there, but they're just kind of wondering, like, maybe this is a good time to dip their toe in the water with consulting, see where that leads them. And they also do acknowledge the low GPA, but indicate that they had some medical issues, and that it was a long time ago, like 15 years ago, right? Because this person's got 10 years of experience. So you had some back and forth with this candidate, but what's your take? Because this is that GPA does loom pretty large, and it's a late round. This is a weird year. What do you think of this person?
Yeah, this is quite tricky, actually. I think, honestly, Graham. Certainly, like I'm sort of taking a guess here, but I assume for whatever reason the late application is coming in because maybe their job has been disrupted through this COVID-19 situation. But assumption aside, the candidate's applying late, obviously, and only applying to Emory, and recognising actually that that's due to family considerations. They're based in Atlanta. They're going to stay in Atlanta with their family, so they're targeting Emory. So that's understandable, although it's obviously very risky only applying to one program. They've got a 710 on the GMAT. They say they might even retake the GMAT and bump the score up. I say that simply because I think this person's clearly smart. Mm-hmm. You can't score a 710 on the GMAT and be a bit of a slouch academically, right?
Right.
If you score a 245 GPA, you can be a bit of a slouch academically.
Sure.
But clearly there is some context there, according to the candidate anyway. I mean, medical issues and so forth, and I think maturity issues. I think they acknowledge that also. And they're going to be honest about that in the application, which, frankly, you would hope they would be honest, right? My concern here is you can show me you're smart, i.e. have a good GMAT, even retake it and bump the score up, but you can't show me that you're academically committed. You've been away from college for 10 years. Have you taken any additional coursework over that time? And so on and so forth. And I guess in this case the answer is no, otherwise they would have acknowledged that they'd done that. So if I was this candidate, that would be the first thing I do, even if they're rushing the application in for this season, mm-hmm. or if they were waiting for next season, but I do think it's this season, I would enroll in 2 or 3 classes over this summer and show that you are absolutely committed to this transition. Even if you've only realised last week that you need to make this transition, show that you're going in full tilt. And, whatever this coursework is, as an AdCom, I want to see that conviction for this switch.
Right.
The other side of the application, I have to assume that the person has done well in their professional career, 10 years. Clearly, that's allowed them to mature. They've got to show real good impact through that work, and hopefully they can do that. The candidate didn't talk give us any insight, I don't think, in the extracurriculars of the volunteer side. Maybe there's some stuff there also. That would be very good. But as an older candidate, i.e. 10 years, there are other issues that they need to overcome. They need to show that they really fit. They need to show that they really understand the Emory experience and how they're going to fully engage both inside and outside the classroom. The sort of stigma attached sometimes to older candidates is they're just going to show up, take the classes, leave, hang out with their family or whatever, and not participate full on. So the candidate also needs to overcome that. So I honestly think it'll be challenging. If they're waiting an additional year, i.e., if they were applying next year, I think it's more doable in terms of getting those classes onto their belt and really showing this commitment. It's going to be a little bit tough this year. That said, we know we're in extraordinary circumstance. From Emory's standpoint, I mean, I don't know what their admissions numbers are looking like this season, but I would imagine across the board all the top schools are going to look favourably at outstanding candidates no matter how late they are in the application cycle. So if this candidate can really overcome these hurdles, then yeah, absolutely, they might well have a spot in the class. But that 245, Graham, is going to loom large in the discussion at Emory.
Yeah, I think what well said. You kind of really summed this one up. The one thing that I thought about is, you mentioned they've got to stay in Atlanta, and it's a late round, and they have a low GPA, tons of work experience. So there are a lot of potential, like, sort of weaknesses or as you say, challenges to overcome. And I did wonder why they're not also looking at, say, Georgia Tech, which has a full-time MBA. It's actually pretty solid, full-time MBA program, is in Atlanta. And I don't know, I have not done my homework to see whether they're still accepting candidates because, every school has different rules in this kind of COVID-19 era here. But it did occur to me that, that Georgia Tech's a good school. They might really appreciate the kind of operations and manufacturing background that this candidate has. And it's less prestigious than Emory, I guess you would say, right? But it's not, light years behind or anything. It's still, it's in that market. It's a well-respected university. So in any event, just something to think about. But I do agree to the extent that he could sign up and take a class and at least tell the admissions committee he's doing that. That might help. But I think at the end of the day, it's just going to depend on how Emory's yield is going. Are they losing a lot of internationals? Could they use a local guy that's easily available at the last minute to jump into the class? So I don't blame this person for throwing in an application. I think we'll just have to see. It's going to be challenging, I would say.
Yeah, I think your advice is good in terms of looking at other Atlanta-based schools. And, I wish the candidate the best of luck. I do think there are challenges here.
Yeah, agreed. So let's move on and talk about...
Oh, before we do that, I'm sorry, Graham.
Sure. No, go ahead.
I love the boxing angle.
Yes.
So that was the one extra thing this candidate does in their time away from work. And the interesting thing about boxing, I think, is twofold. One is it's not that common, so there's something different there. Also, it does show some of the characteristics that top MBA programs seek out in terms of perseverance, dedication, and so on and so forth. So actually, that could be an interesting additional element to the application, but I'll leave it at that.
As long as the committee doesn't worried about rejecting him because he might get angry or something. No, but I agree. It's not something you see every day, and it is a sport that requires quite a bit of, it's really demanding.
It's kind of like marathon running.
Yeah.
We really tend to laud people that complete marathons. Having done it once myself, I just think people that complete marathons are completely nuts because I'd never do it again. But the point is, those folks that do this type of stuff, there's a level of dedication and perseverance and commitment that really does stand out.
Yeah, agreed. So, all right. So yeah, good luck to that person. We'll see how it turns out. Hopefully they'll update us on their ApplyWire posts and keep us in the loop if they throw in an app to Georgia Tech or whatever they decide to do. So let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 2. So this person is also a last minute kind of looking to start this fall applicant, and she is applying to Berkeley, Kellogg, UCLA Anderson, USC Marshall, and Yale SOM. She currently does, I guess she's been doing sales and business development overseas, and she's also a co-founder of a tech startup. She'd love to stay in the tech and entrepreneurship domain post-MBA. And it sounds like, some of the plan might be returning to the company that she co-founded. Her GPA was a 3.98 in undergrad, and she's been working for 5.5 years, located in Seattle. And she mentioned that she would just like to use the MBA to pivot out of kind of business development into kind of a more operations role. And also she wants, I presume, to use the MBA to help kind of learn how to raise their second round of funding for her startup, or maybe it's not learn how, but, have access to doing so. Obviously, business schools are really good at putting you into a network. It sounds like she's already raised, $750,000 in seed funding. It's a SaaS, software service type play, and they've reached break even. They've got $1 million in annual revenue, and so she wants to kind of scale the team, hire for the U.S. office, and mentions that she's the only female on the board of this company, that she is a non-U.S. citizen but lives in the U.S. And taken the GRE in 2 weeks and is crunched for time, but is going to see what happens. So before I ask for your point of view on this one, I wanted to mention that I had some dialogue with this candidate, and my principal kind of question was, so wait, you're running a startup, it sounds like it's doing well, and you're going to just leave that to go off to business school, which instantly creates this question in my mind of, well, how well is the startup actually doing? Because you see a lot of people go off to business school having done a startup, but then suddenly they're going to work for McKinsey when business school's over. So that was my first thought, is like, how successful is this startup, and what, why would you want to leave? And so she was actually kind enough to respond and say, look, I've got a great team in place. We're not in an active growth phase right now because of the current climate. We're just trying to survive. So it's actually a nice time for me to step away and delegate day-to-day stuff to her direct reports. And she's got co-founders, plural, that can back her up while she's in school. So she, I think, really does feel confident that she could go off and get the MBA and then come back with a new set of skills and help raise funds and take the business to the next level. So I feel better about that now. But then you mentioned to me before we got on the air that you had a concern that was not really related to her career, but related to school selection.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this candidate still has to take the GRE. So she's taking the GRE in 2 weeks, crunch for time, but we'll do my best, see what happens. So my concern here is that if this candidate had more time, could prepare well for the GRE, apply early round next season, I would imagine this candidate should be applying to the very top schools.
Right.
Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, a couple of other M7s, and shouldn't compromise from that, sort of really top high caliber programs. I mean, it sounds to me like she's done very well as an entrepreneur, and she's got a 3.98 GPA. You imagine she gets a 330 something on the GRE, because it sounds like she's got to be super smart. I think she's done well, like I say, done very well as an entrepreneur, and so on and so on. This is a candidate that top schools would love to have in their program. Obviously we don't know what she does outside of work, maybe some other good stuff there also. But yeah, I mean, when I was reading this, I was thinking, if only you could just wait, really prepare well, and make some deliberate moves. You may well be, for example, Harvard or Stanford in the following season. So the question for me back to the candidate is it really important that you now go to business school because you're entrepreneurial, the startup, surely COVID-19 has impacted the business climate, and it sounds like it's impacted this particular business significantly, and that's why she's decided that it would be a good time to step away, go to business school for a couple of years, and then be able to step back into the business as things start to ramp back up. That to me seems like her thinking. I just want to make sure she fully understands that she may be losing an opportunity to go to the very, very best. Now, the schools that she selected, they are great schools. I mean, great's a relative term, I suppose, but, Haas, Kellogg, Anderson, Marshall, Yale, very good schools. But it's not Harvard and Stanford, and not that they're the only very, very good schools, but in if you're looking at private equity and looking at raising funds and various other things, we know the very, very best schools give you a little bit more opportunity than the ones that are a little bit of a tier down.
Yeah, I think this is a tough call, because I think on the one hand there could be, like you say, circumstances which dictate that her stepping away from the business now and going off to school would make a lot of sense. Like maybe they're crunched for cash, and she's taking a salary and is like, hey, if I step away and go off to school, it'll ease the burden on the business. And there could be any number of reasons, and she might also be thinking about raising that money and when they're going to do it. And I think, I don't know to what extent she is sort of geolocationally bound. So for example, most of these schools, or a number of them, let's see, 3 of the 5 are all on the West Coast. I was wondering, is something, does she want to stay West Coast? And but then she does have Yale and Kellogg on the list, which was a little more confusing. So I think part of what's driving this list is who will still take an application at this late date in the year. I mean, that's really what this is, I think.
Yeah. Is Wharton not taking apps at this time, Graham? Do you know?
It's a good question. I know that they extended the deadline. I think it's any day now if they are still taking them. But I want to say, I'm going to get this wrong, but I want to say it was like end of May or something. So maybe there is still a little bit of time left. But in any event, I also wondered, okay, your company's software is service, you're going to be raising money. Like, what is it, what field does it, does the company make software for? And have you thought about fit in terms of schools and their access to that industry, or, whatever it might be? I mean, if it's a SaaS product in the healthcare domain, then, geez, Wharton's healthcare management program might be great. Or, if it's in some other domain, I don't know, quantitative finance or whatever it might be, there could be other schools that might be better suited. So I don't know. I am on the fence. I agree that, that waiting and applying in the fall to all the top schools, and that may very well include some of these schools that are on her current list, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know her personal situation. And I will say, I don't know anything about her outside activities and what makes her multidimensional. And I mean, I am kind of interested that she's a non-U.S. citizen but lives in the U.S. So I'd love to know, what country does she hail from? Is it Canada? Is it India? That would be helpful to know too, because some of these countries are more represented than others in the applicant pool. But I guess, look, she can apply now and see what happens. But you're right. There will always be that concern. Has she walked away from the potential to land in Palo Alto or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Tough call, and I would need to know more.
And you don't need to go to the very best school to be
No.
extraordinarily successful, right? And I think you mentioned it in our last podcast or a very recent one. Tim Cook got his MBA from, was it Duke or Darden? It's Duke,
It's
right?
Duke, yeah.
Duke. I mean, anyone that can argue that Tim Cook would have been more successful to have gone to another school is really not making any credible sense, right? So all these top programs provide you terrific access to great outcomes, but you're just increasing that likelihood if you target the very, very best.
Yeah, agreed. So I think, kind of enough said there, I guess. I mean, I think,
getting
obviously an MBA from Haas and then trying to fundraise in the Bay Area, probably not a bad thing to be doing.
Sure.
So, I mean, this could work out for her. I agree, though, that it does feel a little rushed, and but best of luck to her. I really hope it works out, and that she.
But it just brings a bigger point, Graham, is there is this incentive for some candidates to rush applications in because of the macroeconomic environment.
Right.
because of COVID-19. So we're seeing that's not, anecdotally just one or two. We're seeing a lot of applicants deciding to get those applications rushed in.
Yep.
Because of the situation. But I just want to make sure that folks are really thinking about this for the long run.
Yeah, and I will say I did see someone, it was in the survey work we're doing. I saw that there were candidates who were saying things like, I've deposited at 2 schools because I want to see how they play out, how the COVID-19 thing plays out. So if one school's like, yeah, we're going to be in person because we're a little rural campus and there is no one around here. And another school's like, we're in a big city and we're going to have you do online for the first semester. So we're seeing different behavior in the market than we normally would see.
You might have seen that on DecisionWire too, because I've seen that same commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on and talk about Wiretaps candidate number 3. So this is a DecisionWire candidate. They are undecided about where to attend. They've been admitted to Kellogg, and they also applied to Booth, LBS, and MIT. This is to start this fall, and they want to work in private equity. GMAT score was 740, and they mentioned in the note that they were admitted to Kellogg, as I said, but they're waiting on Sloan. They've had an interview, but haven't heard yet. They're on the wait list at Booth from round 2 and LBS. So they have a couple of wait lists and one kind of in-process application. And they're wondering, they're going to hear very soon. In fact, I think by the time that, this podcast airs, they may have already heard from Booth and LBS, right?
Yeah.
So they're just wondering, though, let's assume that they get into all 4. Where should they go? And they say, I want to know, what is the view of this community, the ClearAdmit community, based on which school would provide the best options in financial services roles globally with recognition and flexibility across markets? And so there's been quite a bit of dialogue, as you might expect. What did you make of the back and forth that was happening?
Yeah, no, it's very good because, obviously it shows the strength of the community, different folks weighing in. I think the other aspect to this candidate is that perhaps in the long run they want to be in the United States, even if in the short run it could be Asia or the United States. I think that was included in the consideration. So, frankly, obviously their only option right now is Kellogg, and that's a terrific option. People certainly underestimate sometimes the power of the Kellogg finance area, but it's very good. So we know that. But if you're admitted to Kellogg, Booth, and MIT and LBS, I mean, that's terrific. They're all very evenly matched in terms of overall brand and credibility and so forth. And what I mean by that is, any candidate can make an argument for any of those 4 schools, depending on their own personal and professional circumstances. That all said, I think the overall sentiment might have lent towards Booth over the other 3, M7 and LBS. And, obviously geographic and sort of career issues dialed into the conversation. So if they want to be in London or in Western Europe, then LBS becomes more of a consideration. That might also be the case in Asia, but certainly in the United States, it was Booth, MIT, and Kellogg are the considerations. So yeah, I mean it's definitely not an easy decision. But the real nice thing about this is different folks weighed in with very cogent reasoning, I think, Graham.
And I was one of them, actually.
Oh, boy.
I do think, I think a lot of people looking at that list of schools is going to say, finance, well, Chicago is, one of the noted finance schools, probably alongside Wharton, and people talk about, Columbia and Stern. I think people talk about LBS quite a bit when it comes to finance, but, it's not a U.S. school, so it's a little bit of a different thing. I think MIT has always been known as having a pretty good finance department, and it's sort of a dark horse there as well. And as you said, Kellogg's finance department is not bad either, right? It's not. So I do think to some extent, and this was my advice to the candidates, that they need to really think carefully about where they want to land, short and long term, and in what kinds of roles. Because I'm no expert at all on finance, but I do know that, for investing, Columbia has a nice edge. When it comes to certain types of, quantitative finance, Tepper, people talk about all the time, right? So there's just, depending on what kind of finance you want to get into, investment banking, and there could be any venture capital, right? There's all these different pieces. And I think some of these schools have different strengths. And so figuring that out, and I also think, the geography is important. And I think given that this person wants to maybe be in Asia, as you said, but then also flip back to the US at some point as well, they need to find the right school that has kind of a network in both of those markets. And I think clearly, for the US, MIT, Booth, and Kellogg, it's like a no-brainer. They all have tremendous brand in the States. Obviously, they have slight regional, pulls, right? So there's more people in the Midwest who ended up graduating from Booth and Kellogg than there might be from Sloan. And obviously on the East Coast, you have more Sloan grads. So there's that aspect. But I think the one wild card here is Asia, right? So which of these schools has the biggest network in Asia? And I don't know the answer to that question. It could really be any of them, but I will say that part of me wonders to what extent MIT and their global reputation, not necessarily just for business, but also for engineering and technology, makes them kind of a household name in some of these markets in, far places. So I would look into the alumni clubs in the Asian markets that this candidate is particularly interested in. I bet you that LBS, for example, has a great network and alumni base in like Hong Kong, right? Given the UK's ties to that market. But I also think, MIT probably has a pretty amazing network in, say, Tokyo or Singapore, or so they have to figure out where they might want to go and the size of the network in those markets, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to that, and maybe a little bit of fit too. These are all different programs, right?
And the trick for looking at the alumni networks is, look, pre-COVID-19, so not currently right now, but pre-COVID-19, how active were these networks? So it's not just about raw numbers. A school can say, wow, we got 1,000 alums in Asia, we got this, that, and the other. But when did they last have a formal meeting, a gathering, a conference, or whatever it is? So the how active a network is actually more important, I think, than just the gross size of that network.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, Tuck is a good example of that. They have a smaller network, but it's very loyal and people call you back. I think one thing they could do right now, they have an admit in hand from Kellogg. I would ask somebody at Kellogg to put them in touch with the head of the alumni club in whatever market it is that they are curious about. Yeah. They'll find that they'll be able to maybe have a Zoom or a phone call with that person or email exchange and learn more about what's going on in that market with the alumni network. And then they could do the same as the other schools, admit them. Again, can't go wrong. These are all great schools.
Yeah, great schools.
Yeah, so in any event, best of luck to this person as they decide. And hopefully by now they actually have more than one offer in hand based on some decisions that would have come out, I guess, last week. So in any event, we shall see. But it was an interesting debate, and there's some good advice on the site from the community, as you pointed out. Yeah,
very good.
So that brings us to the end. We went through our 3 entries. I guess we have some more news coming. We've got a lot of cool stuff in the works. I'm very excited about this webinar series that we mentioned last week that's forthcoming. So stay tuned for more information on that. It's going to be really great for prospective candidates to build some community and learn a few things as they get ready to apply. But other than that, I appreciate you picking these out as always, Alex. And stay healthy and safe. And we'll be back in a week's time, I guess.
Very good. Stay safe, everybody, and best of luck.